Hi, everybody. I'd like you to meet my new best friend, Tim Walter. We have only corresponded, and I kind of feel like I know him, like many of you feel you know me when you finally meet me. Oh, you look just like what you look like. Yeah, well, it's for better or worse. Anyway, Tim is works with Earth Energies, and I found him when I was digging around about ley lines. So we're going to go through some definitions, but I'm going to let Tim introduce himself to you, and then we'll go through the definitions. And I do have two or three questions, which I think are really interesting. So the world is yours, Tim.
if only the world were mine. Yes. So yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on, Nancy Jean. It's nice to be here. Let me just fiddle with my. There you go. That's better. Yeah. So well, I'm Tim Walter. I'm a alternative life coach and a house healer, I suppose, is the best way that I describe myself. I have a YouTube channel where I share my experiences of dowsing and earth energy and what is probably fairly appropriate these days with more and more people that are waking up to the sort of a spiritual way of seeing the world. I share my experience of doing that awakening process. I've really taken my time over it. It started in 1998, so I'm on a gentle path, unlike some people these days who find that it happens very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So shall I go into the background of how things changed for me?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I was interested that you had a degree in broadcast film, because that was what my bachelor's degree was in. And I thought, okay, now I can tell everybody, go watch his shows because they'll be so beautifully run. unlike mine, where I'm an old lady who had to learn computer stuff. And then I watched your show, your live yesterday, and you're just like me. The lights weren't right.
Oh yeah. Yesterday was a classic. Yes, yeah, exactly. I'd forgotten to turn the lights on and all of that stuff. No. I trained. I went to film school. It wasn't a degree. It was a diploma. Actually, I deliberately took a course at what was actually one of the top film schools in Britain in 1980. It was a diploma course, deliberately so that it was practical, not doing all the
academic stuff.
Academic stuff. Yeah, because I hated school, so I couldn't wait to get out of school and go and do something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I trained in film school, and then went off and basically worked in the corporate market. So not in broadcast television as such. I did some work in working with independent producers and that sort of sphere of working up ideas and trying to get ideas into broadcast television. And I had a modicum of success on that, but as I've said many times before, as a film director, Ridley Scott's career was never in danger. I was never going to be kind of making it the big time.
I wasn't. Orson Welles slept well every night.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, and there actually there's a whole bunch of reasons why that would be the case, but we can go into those later, perhaps. So yeah, I was in the corporate market, suited and booted quite a lot of the time for a lot of my clients. But I was working as a production consultant. One of my biggest clients was Sun Life of Canada here in the UK. And they were one of the world's biggest life assurance companies. So it was financial services and all this sort of thing. And I was putting on conferences and making training videos and sales promotional videos and all that sort of stuff. Quite high pressured, actually, a lot of deadlines, and you've got to deliver and all of this, this sort of thing. And I really wasn't liking that world at all. It was providing the income, and you carry on doing things because you think you have to do those things. And then in 1998, we moved into a house on the Welsh borders. And moving into that house from the suburbs of London, we moved from. And we moved over there to get some space and to get some headspace and to feel a bit more relaxed in our lifestyle. But moving into that house, we discovered that we were sharing it with a ghost. And that was the thing that really completely changed my life, because being introduced to this whole concept of, well, there's a whole world out there that actually is very, very different to the world that I was living in. And we basically were introduced to this spirit of this deceased lady who we learned very quickly was called Jane when she was alive. Jane was her name. And she was actually a guardian energy of the earth energy lines that were crossing in the back of our house, which is significant to what we'll talk about. But the thing that one of the first things that she said to the ladies that came to sort of help us to understand what was happening in our house at the time, one of the first things she said was, "I just want to be part of the family." So we'd gone through a period of time where, we were being affected by strange things like light bulbs flashing and things not working, electrical things not working, and objects disappearing. Typically the example I use is where I was doing some DIY out at the back there, and it was a hammer or a chisel or something that I put down, and literally I didn't go anywhere. It wasn't like having a senior moment, but literally I turned away, turned back, and this hammer or the chisel, whichever it was, this tool had disappeared completely and utterly. It was nowhere to be seen. And it was like, okay, so something weird is going on, and at that time I was also seeing dark shadows out of the corner of my eye. So there were figures moving around, and I was beginning to feel like, well, there is definitely something a bit unusual. And one of the classic instances that I personally experienced was when I was in the kitchen making a cup of tea, a very ordinary, mundane thing. And I put my hand out to pick up the mug, and right next to me here was another arm. It was literally just a black sleeve on it. And it was there for the briefest of moments, and then it was gone. And so I just thought, well, hang on, I'm having another funny turn. It's one of those moments. And those were the sort of things that were happening before we called in these dowsers, as they were. And they pointed us to this lady, this presence in the back of our house. And so that was the point that changed absolutely everything in our lives. So that led me to meeting a rather wonderful guy called Hamish Miller. Now, some of your viewers might know of Hamish Miller. He wrote a book with Paul Broadhurst called The Sun and the Serpent. And what The Sun and the Serpent is about the journey that Hamish and Paul took in dowsing the earth energy lines, two earth energy lines, male and female energies, as it turns out, that cross the south of England from Marazion in Cornwall, fairly close to where Hamish lived, actually. And they go across the south of England, and they leave the coast in Suffolk, which is sort of diagonally across. But these energy lines go through Glastonbury, they go through Avebury, they go through some fairly major sacred sites along their path. And so Hamish wrote this book about that journey. And part of what he was doing when he was dowsing at the crossing points of Michael and Mary was to identify what the earth energy patterns were doing at those crossing points. Because Hamish always felt that what he was finding at these crossing points was a way of the sentient earth, Mother Earth, literally communicating in symbolism, communicating in sacred geometry. And he was deeply fascinated by that, and very moved by it as well, as actually anybody that picks up a dowsing rod and starts to interact with earth energy, it is actually quite a moving experience. It does touch on something very fundamental in virtually everybody, I think, really. But yeah, broadly speaking, if that gives you some kind of picture of the way that things changed and developed, that's kind of my background.
Well, very good. I was reading cards when I was 12, tarot cards. So I kind of knew how to work with things, but it was actually running into a ghost in a hotel in London and he tried to kill me. The police removed me from the hotel. People in America, we don't take our ghosts nearly as seriously, or we haven't until recently, as they do in England. In England, they know they're there. They know that and I mean, I don't know why that hotel didn't get rid of that guy. But anyway, okay, what you and Hamish and a lot of other people over in England are very, very involved. This is some people call the science of geobiology. In other words, the life of the earth. And we have people here in the U.S. who do it, but it's really hard to get a hold of them. Trust me, because I had to go all the way to England to find you. Okay, you run a center, and I'm going to put his contact information in the description below, but I'm also going to run it across after I give people a chance to put some questions in of how to reach Tim. but you run a thing called house healing. And you run a center where you learn about working with energy to use it that way. Because people are like, okay, you've got ley lines and you work with crystals and you feel all these energies, but what good does it do anybody? I mean, if everybody...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I suppose, pretty soon after I started finding out about earth energy and being drawn into this world, the world of subtle energies, and meeting Hamish and having many conversations with that great man, I made several video productions that can be found on the YouTube channel as well for your interested viewers.
They're wonderful. Go get them, guys. Go look at them.
There's a lot of content in there actually of Hamish's wisdom. I mean, he was such a lovely guy. And so one of the things that I found very early on was that, I recognized that, well, I'll use the expression, dear God, I'm changing, I mean, in discovering the spiritual part of myself, if you like, by looking at all of this stuff, it made a huge difference to me personally and how I felt about life and how I felt about everything. And so I realized quite quickly that actually I wanted to actually introduce other people to this. And I thought all I had to do would be to run a few dowsing courses. And so that's what I started to do, was just to introduce some very, very simple, small dowsing courses at the house that we were living at. And it was Introduction to Earth Energy. Now, what happened was that I basically was good friends with Hamish for the last 7 years of his life. He died in 2010. And we used to have many conversations about how it's really a simple process of helping people to understand that all they have to do is to change their connection, to focus more on their heart, raise their own energy from the lower chakras up to their heart energy, to the energy of love, and then the whole expression of reality changes for them. And it's great in principle. And as I say, I used to have a lot of conversations with him about that. So when he died, I kind of felt, because I'd been losing interest, as you can imagine, in the corporate video production world, I felt, well, I really need to kind of dive in. It's either now, look, I'm either going to do this now. I either dive in feet first and fully immerse myself in what I believe in the earth energy, in the dowsing, in all of the benefits of this aspect of self, or I say, no, I'm not going to do that, and I walk away. And there's no way, given what I felt, given my love for Hamish, really, that there was no way I was going to walk away from it. So I actually did, 2010 really was when I started to actually kind of make an effort to get out there. And of course, at the same time, the world was gently waking up. We were approaching 2012 and all the hoo-ha of what was going to happen, at that time. And so what it's now evolved into is that, yes, in answer to your question, yes, I teach people about the house healing process, about the house healing modality. And the fundamental point of all of this is that, yes, when you work with all of these subtle energies, you can improve your world. Another expression that I have for this work is basically reality engineering. What we're doing is we're asking the management upstairs, that's a Hamish Miller term, which I have adopted to encompass all of the angels and all of the archangels and all of those wonderful divine beings that are present and will be present for us if we ask. So we basically, in the healing process, we are inviting them to affect, in a very positive way, the life of somebody else. And what we do is we basically, the process is that we douse using a set of questions of about 50 section headings or so. So we're looking for ghosts, spirits, trapped souls, earth energy lines, toxic lines, all sorts of things, historical, blah, blah, blah. ET influences as well comes under this. So we're looking for all these detrimental things that are holding a person back or are blocking that person in doing what they want to do, or even in just simply expressing themselves in their fullest sense, which is half of the battle of being a human being these days. So once we've got the information and we plot that on the floor plan, we can work anywhere in the world. And I've got clients all over the world, in Australia and all sorts. Do a lot of work in the States, actually. And yeah, and so what we do then is once we've got that information, we basically invite the management to do rebalancing work on that information. So we at that point are really sitting as the observer and allowing that flow to go through us as the point of awareness. And then we, obviously we have the conversations with the client to see what's changing, how's things improving. And for me personally, what I tend to do at that point is to be working more under that heading of alternative life coach. So then for me, it becomes very much a talking cure, as well as adding in the healing work for them. But other house healers. So now that I teach this house healing process, other house healers develop their own specialization. So we have people that are working very closely and intimately with underground water flows and the intelligence of water, for example. That's becoming really quite a thing. And there's a particular lady who's doing great work with that. We have people that are really specialists in the dark and heavy. We won't label them, but the dark and heavy energies, the personalities that are there. And she does brilliant work with that. We have people that work with earth energy. I like working with earth energy myself as well. But there's all of these sort of specialisms, and the framework of the house healing, as I've just described it, is that actually you can put any of your other healing modalities that you've learned, so Reiki practices, or even just working with tarot cards, as you described earlier, or working with crystals. If you've got a real specialization and a real love of that, and you've done a lot of work, and that's part of your experience, that can be kind of bolted into the modality, because simply, really, all we're doing in what we call the house healing work is identifying those blockages, and then we're working with the energies, as I say, to rebalance and assist and to help the person through their particular crisis that they're going through.
Okay. You used the term dowsing and about doing some of this stuff. Now I have these little jobs, these little and they're a little tough in front of the screen. And I also have, and people who are used to my channel are used to this. This is my table.
Okay.
And this is a dowsing chart that is based off my bigger garden path, but I took all the words out and put a way, and this has a lot of different ways you can use it. Now I know you douse just using your own yes/no feelings. But you do one thing I like. I always start with my pendulum swinging, so I'm not presuming it's going to go anywhere, But the other thing I want to talk about that really interests me about Tim when I started watching his shows is at the bottom of this chart, it says the 3 things I ask every day when I work with anything is, do I have permission to douse or look? Am I aligned with my higher self? And am I fully protected? And Tim talks a lot about protection, and I'm going to make the table go away because it takes way a lot more of the screen. Okay, go by. You talk about protection, and we talk about these are subtle energies, but there are times when they will not do subtle things to you.
No, absolutely.
if you're not watching out for yourself. So I really like the idea that you talk a lot about protection and knowing where you're going and really tying into that, because I think I watch, no offense to other readers, and everybody lives their life their own way, but they'll say, oh, come do remote viewing with me. I can't tell you how that chills me, because I know how to do remote viewing. And there's a very good reader on the channels who used to read for the CIA, and it makes her crazy because she said, unless they know how to protect themselves, you don't know what you're flying. I mean, there really is this whole universe out there that we're becoming in tune with. And this is our time to do it. But I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, about protecting yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, the protection is absolutely crucial, especially when you're starting out. I mean, and there is no 2 ways about it. The fundamental way of looking at all of this that I adopt is that you have your awakening, or if you're born naturally sensitive, then you have an awareness, and you discover that for those natural sensitives, you discover that perhaps you're slightly different to quite a lot of other people. So the way that you see the world is slightly different. But we're all on this remarkable path that takes us to a point of understanding, and a heartfelt, true understanding, when we actually get closer and closer and closer to our real soul self. That's the only way I can describe it. And that's what we go on in, that's the journey that we take in life when we decide to say yes to a lot of this spiritual activity and the spiritual self-development. Now, when we start on that path, what we are doing is basically kind of like getting into a car and on a frosty morning and trying to start it, and it's like, okay, yeah, I got something here. Hang on, is it going? Is it going? No, yeah, no. And it's kind of like chugging, not quite taking, and it's right. Okay, so you're learning. You're learning.
Right.
But at that stage, as you say, and you hinted at there, you're in this. If we look at the lowest level being the physical level, the physical solid level, then next to us we've got the whole astral layer and all of that. Now that layer is full of crap. There's no other way of putting it, and we mean that energetically. So it's just garbage, but it's garbage that has a sentience, and so that there's so much of that stuff that actually will hang on to you and attach itself to you and play silly buggers with you if you give it the chance to. So part of that, the point of the protection is that you have to start being disciplined about being aware of what you're doing, and that's really the goal of the protection, because it's not about being what we're not doing is saying you've got to be scared of what's out there, right? Because actually you don't need to be scared of any of the stuff. Now, I know that you said earlier on that you were attacked by, and people are physically attacked by some of these entities, but there is still a level of awareness and a level that you can actually access and go into a space where there is some pretty unpleasant energy. But if you're doing so in an energy, your own energy and your own perception that is not fear driven and is actually coming from the absolute source of love, compassion, then actually that's a very safe process. But you have to know what you're doing. And that's fundamentally what we're saying is there's a process to be learned. There's a protection method to be adopted and a protocol of understanding what you're doing and an understanding what it is that you're encountering. And therefore you're able to deal with it in an appropriate way instead of running to the hills, being scared out of your wits and basically feeding everything that's approaching you.
Well, my ghost woke up the other parts of me that were there. And he tried to harm me, but my guides and my guardians wouldn't let it happen. What it did do is, and I couldn't like go home and hide in my bedroom or anything because I was touring Europe with a choir. So I had to get on the bus and go to France, and then I had to go to Italy, and I had to go to all these countries to sing. And because and plus that meant I was being thrown constantly into very old environs with very different energy. And what I learned from that was by the end of the tour, I was sketching what rooms we'd be in hours before the bus got there and stuff.
Right.
I mean, and I began to realize I can do all this stuff, and I wasn't afraid of it. And I don't blame the poor guy. He did commit suicide in that hotel, and he's kind of pissed about the world.
Yeah, well, quite.
And about energy and about knowledge and understanding, my second husband, we were talking about him a little bit earlier. He was born in England. He was born in London. He was a physicist. He survived World War II as a child. And he used to say, people used to say to him, because he was a very well-known physicist in the world, he developed the microchips that run everything in the world now, and had a whole lot of pioneer patents in that. And he and I were talking one time when we were first dating. First of all, he was 20 years older than I was. And his friends were all looking at me like, you're running around with a woman who reads cards? What the hell? And his answer was the best one I've ever heard. He said, look, centuries ago, we didn't know where lightning came from. We didn't understand electricity. So we created Thor, or understood that energy as Thor. We created all these ways that the world was going to intervene. And we used to say things like, lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place, when we didn't understand how to control it. He said as soon as physics broke through and gave us the principles for electricity, all of a sudden we didn't need to fear those gods anymore. And he said someday they're going to understand. And this was in the 1980s. He said someday they're going to understand how she does what she does, because he said I've watched her and she changes when she does some of this stuff. So he said I don't discount it, and he said I don't do it. Well, up until the day he died in 2004, he was looking for how I was connected to the universe, and he'd already read a lot on the quantum physics. I know I heard you talking about Dan Winters, whole nother subject, guys. We're not going there today. But he said they're going to find what you do in quantum physics, and he was very good. He was a very instinctive, and he kept saying, "I don't have any of your abilities," and I kept wanting to tell him, "Oh yeah, you do," because you wouldn't be able to understand this much of it. So, a lot of what we're talking about is really a part of a bigger part of nature, and that's what I liked about Earth Energies and Ley Lines, because they tie us back to our planet and the things that are going on around us in our Earth Energies. Yeah, we use the other energies that are coming in, and especially since we've had the photonic shift that we got out of that cloud, and we're getting so much more subatomic particles invading our world. But anyway, that's where all these things tie together. That's why I was fascinated. I was fascinated with you, the work you're doing, and fascinated with the old videos of Hamish, because he had an innate understanding of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. It does all tie back to nature. I mean, that is absolutely the key thing. And that's one of the things that I find really exciting about it all, is actually as more and more people wake up to the spiritual aspects and the spiritual reality that is present, then actually what they're doing is they're connecting intuitively anyway to the natural world. And the more that we reconnect in that sense to what we consider to be nature, then the better it is, full stop. I mean, that's, that we don't want to get into a whole discussion about the state of the environment as such. But the point is that really, from the fundamental spiritual perspective, everything out there, as your husband would have acknowledged as well, is fundamentally illusory. And what science now says is that we project it. And therefore, everything that we experience being out there in the environment, in nature, actually is a part of us. I mean, at a very fundamental level. And again, when we talk about the soul self and ours, the spiritual path of coming back to join and reconnect with the soul self, then actually that's the truth, the underlying truth. Now, we can't live like that as human beings on a day-to-day basis. We can't think, oh yes, this is, I'm going to go for the walk in the woods, that's part of me. I mean, we kind of can, but we can't really, because you get all sorts of distractions and all sorts of things that come in and upset it. But the more that we can actually assimilate and understand and associate with the subtle energies and the personalities in it.
Wait a second. That's my fault. That's my smoke alarm.
Okay.
Okay, they stopped it.
Is that breakfast or is that lunch?
No, it was my incense, and it really.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Today, you're really firing up the energies over here. I want you to know.
Right. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We like that. Yeah. So this is the important thing about it, is that it actually, I think, even for people that don't realize this is what's happening, or they don't even realize, or they don't want to go as far as thinking about the world as being part of them, as soon as you start on the path to any degree and start to get involved in earth energy in particular, then you are connecting and changing the environment in which you live, which is brilliant.
That brings me to a question that we got. This is from Carol, and I know who she is. And her question is, how can I identify an area in the U.S. where the people and the animals can live in harmony? I want to move somewhere where my horses and I can live harmoniously with the earth.
Right. Okay. It's a good question, and it's a question that okay, I'm going to have to answer in several different ways, because on the fundamental human level, you could simply get the map of the USA and douse it if you know how to douse. Do we think that Carol knows how to douse? Do we know?
I can show Carol how to douse. She's
Yeah.
seen me work with my dowsing garden.
Right.
She's seen how that works.
Okay, fine. So literally at that level, it would be possible you just simply tune in and you ask upstairs to be shown the most beneficial and positive area that you would want to live, where you can be maximizing your harmony with the earth, with nature, with the horses, all of those things. So you're setting the intention as you douse to actually be shown by your guides the most beneficial area in which to live. That's one way that we can answer that question for Carol, and you can help her literally do that. And that's something that, you know, I've helped other people with, and all of this sort of stuff. Now, I say that I want to answer the question in slightly different ways, because the other way that I would look at this, and it might be that Carol goes like, yeah, I don't want to know that. But the other way that I would look at it is latching on to what we just said, which is talking about the way that everything is a part of us. So what's the subtext of Carol's question is actually, at the moment, I'm living somewhere that is not good for me. It's not good for the animals that I've got. It's not good for what I see around me, because what I see around me is a lot of disharmony and, you know, angst or trouble or whatever it is. And okay, so and what that says to us is that actually Carol is in an energy that could be improved upon, because actually there's no reason why we can't live in the world actually mostly encountering very positive people and very positive experiences. And I'm saying this, I'm not denigrating anything or being difficult about anything. I'm just saying that this is another way to look at it, which is that, you know, what we're saying is that the world we live in is created from our own inner experience, co-creating with upstairs.
Right.
And so therefore if we believe that, then we have to live. We don't have to live, but we can take the viewpoint of living from that experience and saying, right, if what I'm seeing out there is not harmonious and pleasant, then what is it in here that I am being shown that I need to be working with and healing and moving on from and rebalancing in order for the external environment to change?
Right.
Right. So that's the difficult way of living this life, is to actually say, right, I'm going to do the work and do the inner work and do the healing and do the dark shadow stuff that you have to do in order to actually progress towards being more in alignment with that soul self energy that we talked about right from the start, which is not, I mean, Carol probably just thinks, you know, but
she rescues horses, and that's what she does. So
okay, right, excellent, right. So in which case there's a really lovely compassionate energy there to her, right? Okay, so in which case go to plan A. Do the dowsing and just simply look and ask, and that's the energy that will move you.
Okay,
Carol.
There's another word that a phrase you use in your work. It's called geopathic stress.
Right.
So can you explain geopathic stress?
So geopathic stress is, as with a lot of these terms, different people use the same label and they interpret it slightly differently. So my interpretation of geopathic stress is fundamentally anything that is emanating from the earth, whether it be natural or not natural, that is detrimental to the individual that's living in a particular space or working in a particular space. So all of the work that we are doing as house healers, and when we get in to work with the subtle energies, is fundamentally to change these aspects that are detrimental to the individual. Okay, so some people quantify some people say that there are geopathic stress lines. So they say, right, there's a geopathic stress line coming through here. And that's fine. They're just using the label in a different way to the way that I use it. So I use geopathic stress as a catch-all heading to a multitude of different things that impact or can impact a person in the subtle energy levels. Some people use the term geopathic stress to say specifically it's like where underground water might be crossing a earth energy line, or it might be a ley line that's going through, and that's geopathic stress. So different people interpret them slightly differently, but what I say is it's a catch-all phrase. It's really encompassing all the sort of work that I do, and the sort of work that you would do as well with a space as well, where you know, even when even if you're not going into it in quite so much detail, you know, smudging will affect geopathic stress. It will alleviate some of the effects of it, for example.
Apparently it likes to set off my fire alarm. The other, let's see, we've got house healing dowsing. Okay, I work with sometimes he's an architect. He also does Akashic records, and I was talking to him when I was trying to figure out some better information about ley lines, because people throw that word around like you look at, like, you know what it is, you know. And I said, what do you know about that? And he said, well, actually, he had an interesting experience, and he had a friend who was a shaman from Peru, who was also an architect. Oh, Casey.
Oops.
She's on it. My daughter's home sick. She's really loving this. It's cold here, so opening the door.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And I did put it out, but it's apparently not out.
Still wafting.
Still doing its thing. Okay.
Well.
There went. Okay. He took, the woman called and said she loved her house that this guy had happened to have built.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
her daughter was in a bedroom on the far end of one wing, and her daughter just kept having all these weird illnesses, and no one could figure out where it was coming from. So he went out with the shaman, and he said he never would have felt it because he's not tied to that. But the shaman came in and said, there's an errant ley line, a very powerful one that runs right under this room, and it's sending too much energy into her body, which is in a growing state, and it was disrupting her growth. So the shaman came in and threw crystals and laying out some paths. He moved the ley line out of the room and moved it to go to the other side of the house. But he said, this won't hold forever. I've just interrupted the flow for a period of time. So the woman went to build another house. Apparently she has a lot of money. And she was going to build another house. And so she brought him, the architect, to look at it. And they brought the shaman in again. And I don't know what this woman's sense was, but she had another big chunky ley line that was connected to water that was running right underneath. So he said, but if you reorient the whole house on the piece of land, you will miss doing that again. You know, so you hear things, and people, I don't like to tell people scary stories about things like that, but you have to understand energy's energy. It doesn't have a value. And if you have, and it truly is something that's moving through your body, it can be for better or for worse.
Yeah, they can, absolutely. And the point about all of this is that it is actually completely unique. So, you know, you've got a daughter there who was being affected by that particular ley line. It's not necessarily the case that everybody that would have, you know, that went to sleep in that bedroom would have been affected by it in the same way. So the uniqueness of each individual is really important in this whole picture. But yeah, it's you know, it doesn't have a moral compass. I mean, none of this earth energy stuff, you know, it can affect you detrimentally as well as positively. I mean, the point of sacred geometry, you know, is to work with the energies in a positive and enhancing way. And what the shaman there was saying was that if you orientated the building in a certain way, then the flow would have been harmonious with the building. I mean, there's still no guarantee necessarily, unless they asked about it, that it would be harmonious to every individual that was going to live in that building. But you know, sacred geometry is there because it is sacred, and half of that is the intention of harmony and balance. So therefore, you know, you're on a winner by following some of the principles of that. I mean, a lot of space can be designed to be very life enhancing in terms of the feeling that it gives. And a lot of that is to do with sacred geometry and size and shape and form. But also, you know, quite frankly, there are ley lines are slightly different to what we call earth energy lines. So earth energy lines tend to weave like rivers where they're focused. Ley lines are typically straight alignments, and usually it's actually a lot easier to see a ley line and to plot a ley line when you're looking at a map and plot it like that, rather than being on site. But it's possible because these terms are used so freely and interchanged so much that actually most of the time when people are talking about ley lines, they're actually talking about earth energy lines.
Yeah, I know. I got that feeling as I was reading things.
Yeah, exactly. And so it does cause problems because there are also ley lines, but as I say, they're straight alignments and you know, what have you. But earth energy is absolutely fundamental to our well-being. It's fundamental to how we exist on the planet, and you know, because we've been brought up with it. We've evolved with earth energy. It is a natural field of energy. It's a little electrostatic, I think somebody described it as. I don't think that's Rory Duff. I think there's somebody else that described it as electrostatic, but it's basically in a kind of electrical field. It emanates out from the quantum field, but we won't go into the quantum science, as you said earlier, but it emanates out from the quantum field into the electrical field. And when we find an earth energy line, it's basically because what we've got is a more focused, more concentrated flow, a more concentrated charge, effectively. So, and so that's why it can also be described as either male or female, positive, negative. This sort of descriptor has a very different polarity. So those sort of electrical fields have an effect on health. It's as simple as that. But equally, they have an effect on us, on our consciousness, on our ability. I'm touching up here, which is the brain, but really I should be touching here, which is the heart. It touches, it affects our ability to connect to the management and this whole subtle aspect of self. So again, that's why, you know, I encourage people from a lot of the time on my website, I'm talking about, or rather on YouTube, I'm talking about connecting with the most powerful and beneficial earth energy power center in the home, because every home, in fact every room, has one particular dominant power center, as we call it, which is the standard vortices, the vortex of earth energy. So when you douse that vortex, when you get a dowsing rod and you go, please show me the most powerful and beneficial earth energy center in this room, it'll show, and you'll go to it and you'll find it. And what you will douse, as you kind of visualize it as you douse it, is like a spiral. So you're dousing this spiral, but really it's a three-dimensional vortex. So the fact is that earth energy as a field of electricity, as an electrical field, and it's a geomagnetic field, so it's produced in combination with the earth, right? That's why we put the term geo in there. It's everywhere. You know, it's not like people say, well, there is a ley line running through this house, or there is an earth energy line running through this house. It's not like there's just this one isolated line and there's nothing else in that sort of, you know, anywhere else nearby. It's throughout everything. You know, we actually, we could be said to be actually made of earth energy, because it's all evolving from that quantum field of possibility. And we are that quantum field of possibility as well, right? And that's something that people forget. So
no,
I forgot where I started on this, but yeah, you see what I mean.
Yeah, well, the other things I found is I know people who work with ley lines, and they work with adjusting ley lines from upper management, comes and snatches them and said, this one's moved to the wrong place. They align them in part with the geology and the geography of the space. But you saw Hamish in one of your documentaries that you did on him when he was in New Zealand. They kept their ley lines attached to the stars. And the people I know who work the most heavily with ley lines but can't explain to me why they're doing what they're doing, they connect them to stars too. And that's kind of, to me, the connection. We have the upper energy that comes in, and then we have the energy that comes from the center of the earth that moves out
Yeah.
And the center of the energy that's being altered by the photonic thing we're in right now with so much subatomic particles, it's charging up that core. This is the image I've been given. It's charging up that core, and at some point that energy is going to come up, and when it comes up, it's going to come up through the ley lines, not through the earth energy lines, but through the ley lines, because they're the most patterned. And that's what I've been told by the people I know who fix ley lines, why they're out there fixing them madly, because this is going to happen.
Because what you're talking about there is earth grids. So you know, that's the fundamental structure. So these are all aspects that can be considered to be the fabric of our reality. And so if that's the narrative that they're following, which I don't dispute at all, because we're certainly going through a phase of massive change, and there's no doubt at all that, you know, we've been through similar, as a species, we've been through similar change in the past. It's just a question of how we've dealt with it in the past and how we're going to deal with it this time, because, you know, this is part of the reason that we're all so many people are waking up now, is that whole charging process and what we're flying through in terms of where we are in the cosmos. So what was I going to say? I was going to say something about the you see your shaman in the story that you told earlier on with the architect. He was working with his shamanic practice and his way of working. One of the things that is very clear now, and this again is something that Hamish basically taught me, and was you know, talking about it all the time. You can change this stuff simply by asking upstairs, and so that's when I was talking about the house healing before, that's what I was really kind of getting at, is that we asked the management to change it. And there's a classic recounting of Hamish asking the management to move a line in New Zealand, where it had been really caught on a particular sacred site, it was, I think, and it was kind of like out of kilter because it had been pinned to that point. And this will be what your colleagues are doing in terms of ley lines as well. So he asked the management to change this line, and he said when they moved it, which they did virtually instantly as the process, there was an audible massive twang sound, which actually knocked Hamish and his party off their feet, because the energy of the shift was so fine, you know, like an elastic band being twanged. So you actually only need to ask, and that's the point. So when we're doing the house healing work and working with adverse energies of various sorts, we're really basically asking the management to shift things and to change things. You don't necessarily need to do it through a shamanic route or through a particular thing. And I expect your ley line group are doing a similar thing. They're probably just asking, unless they're doing sort of earth acupuncture.
They're there with archangels and all kinds of folks.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't mess with frequently.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're lovely. Thank you, archangels, for being there. But I have another question that kind of goes along with what we've just been discussing. Mel B said, I see droughts in the southwest of the U.S., which is true. Is there any way we can change this outcome? I worry that the unscrupulous will use it for their profit to the detriment of others.
Yeah, well, again, I'll try not to go off on a tangent like I did last time with Carol's question or the previous question. But
they're used to tangents on this channel.
Okay. So, I mean, the interesting thing here is that the way that I encourage people to look at their relationship to land or to space is to look at it as from that perspective of being part of my universe, part of my individual universe. It's a unique experience. So the person is looking at it and working with the energy on a very unique and subjective level. So now, what we don't know from Mel B, unless you know, Nancy, is whether she actually lives in that part.
Yes, she does.
She does. So she's there. So these are things that she's actually witnessing in person. So they're part of her environment. So yes, is there any way to change this outcome, to see the droughts? I mean, we think really right back through indigenous cultures that asked for rain and influenced the weather through asking for rain. That's still something that we can do these days, is that you simply ask for more rain, and that you put that intention into your universe and you focus on that. And you can do that in a shamanic way, or you can do that in a sort of working with the devic energies of the weather, and ask for that to occur. What you have to be a little bit careful of is that you always do this in alignment with divine will. That's what I would always say, right? So that you're looking for the outcome to be in alignment with divine will, because otherwise what you're doing is actually you're using your own personal subtle energy. You're using your own personal energy field to effectively manipulate an energy field that is out there in the collective. And in that sense, you're actually in danger of doing it from an ego-based position,
right?
Which means that you're fundamentally on a bit of a low rung on the energy scale, which means that actually you can cause chaos. And so that's one of the dangers of doing the work without due consideration, is that actually you mess and meddle, and actually it just goes, oh, okay, that's a bit of chaos.
The only comment I would make about this one is you didn't see the whole thing was too long for me to type into a question, so I had to just kind of snatch it off my feed. And what I saw was a lot of embodiment of fear of the profit motive that's been running so much of the country, and that she's tying into that. And I think, if we say, I'm not going to have water and they're going to screw me because I don't have water, then, I mean, and it is a real fear. I mean, the profit motive is real. And you're suffering from a bit of that in England, I hear these days. So, but if you can dig your way out of fear and just said, I'll have the rain I need, I'll have the water I need, I'll have it at a price that I can, that's affordable to me, the universe will take care of me. I think that might be another way to look at it. And just even those prayers within each one of us individually. Now, if you get in a group and do it, or get into a circle and do it, it's better. But if you can do it on your own. And I hope Mel writes me a lot, and she has a lot of good questions. And I think that's an excellent one for us to look at using our intentions.
Yeah, it is. And but you're absolutely right, is that none of this work, you need to reduce the fear and the ego-based concerns as much as possible when you're doing any of the work. That's really what you've just said, because for those very reasons, that you just want to be going for the best possible outcome, because fundamentally you are affecting your own reality, and that's you're very much each moment by moment.
You're setting it up.
Yeah, you're setting it up. Yeah.
Okay, I've got another one that you probably, I hadn't even considered this. Does living by the ocean affect the energy around me and my cats?
Well, it will have an effect. What that effect is, I couldn't say, because it's going to vary. As we said before, where everybody is individually and everybody is interacting in a unique way. So we don't know how it's actually affecting you. But again, this is the sort of thing that you could douse for, and simply, I mean, you can either just simply ask upstairs and ask these sort of questions about how is it affecting me. We don't know the circumstance with the cats, whether the cats are being, upset, or whether they're, happy cats, or what it is. But yeah, I mean, to live by an ocean will have some kind of impact.
Well, I think most people feel like it calms them. But then the other one is, and this is the sort of earth energy we're not talking about. Is Northern California going to have a strong earthquake in the next year?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, the San Andreas Fault and all the rest of the fault lines going across there. There's a lot of
northern. That's not northern.
Oh, is that not northern? Oh, is that Southern California?
That's Southern California.
Thank you very much. There you go.
Everybody knows San Andreas Fault.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I don't know where it is. I know it's somewhere in California, but California actually is huge, isn't it? I mean, the thing is, there is a lot of seismic activity all around the Earth at the moment. There has been for the last couple of decades. I mean, I remember dear old Greg Braden talking about the amount of seismic activity, the amount of volcanic activity that was, gently bubbling away. That was in the lead up to 2012, because a lot of people were concerned about that. But what he was saying was that, this is all indicative of Mother Earth shifting her energy and changing her energy. And that probably ties in with your ley line groups as well. But yeah, there is a lot of seismic activity and a lot of shifting and a lot of change. And, but what we don't know is whether it's going to come out in, major quakes or major eruptions, or whether it's going to continue being a bubbling away kind of affair.
Thing.
Yeah.
Well, I've been waiting. I can remember when I was in college, which was a long, long time ago, in the late 60s, early 70s. And people used to say, well, if California falls off, the way the oceans are going to shift, it's going to drown the Middle East and it's going to sort of sink Vietnam. So it would have taken care of a lot of problems. It didn't fall off. And thank God, because I have a lot of friends in California. I don't want your part. I mean, Texas is the last place that'll fall off, which is unfortunate for many ways. But anyway, here's another question. Is it possible to find ley lines where I live? And how is that done?
Yeah, again, it's a question of whether you're wanting to find ley lines or wanting to find earth energy lines. But let's talk about either or, because it's exactly the same process. So basically, if you're looking to find them where you live, in other words, if you're looking to find out whether you've got any detrimental ley lines or earth energy lines running through your house or apartment, then the best thing to do is actually go to Google, take a snapshot, take a screen grab of your house from Google Earth, ideally print it off, because sometimes if you're working with the electrical field of a computer, it interrupts your dowsing and all that stuff. But so ideally print it off. And basically what you want to do is to simply ask the question, is there a detrimental, let's say, ley line? Is there a detrimental ley line on this space? Right? And you just literally, if you're using your right hand to dowse with, so you've got a pendulum ideally, or a rod in this hand, you use your left hand. Can't see my hand, there it is. So you're dowsing with this one, you're using this hand to put it on the printout, and then you just move it along, and basically this is swinging away. And when it gets to a point, if the response has been yes, there is a detrimental earth energy line or a detrimental ley line, when your finger gets to the point on the top line, this pendulum will indicate yes, and therefore you put a mark there, go to the bottom of the page, do exactly the same thing, asking the same question, looking for that detrimental earth energy line or ley line. It'll go, yes, there it is, mark it, and then you can draw it, and it'll show you whether it actually goes through your house or not. Okay, does that make sense?
That's cool, because people ask me that, you keep talking about this stuff and I don't know how to find it. Okay, guys, we're at 58 minutes, and I don't want to keep Hamish. It's dinner time. It's very close to dinner time over there, I understand.
It is actually. It's 5 o'clock. Yes, it is nearly. Yeah.
Well, if you guys do not miss the, I'm going to put your information across so they can see how to reach you. This is how you can reach him by email. And then I'm sure he has a lovely little piece he will send you on how to find all the rest of the stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
The best part of watching his show, other than all of his incredible information, is he lives in probably one of the most gorgeous parts of England. He lives in Yorkshire, and I stayed in Yorkshire because my husband was English, and we went over and visited, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And I cannot tell you, I mean, a lot of the energy lines that we natively have here, or were developed over the time of all the civilizations who lived on here. We've always had a thing in America of let's put a highway on it. I mean, they just pave everything. And so, but when you walk around England and you walk around, is it the Brontes daughters who had their houses in York?
Yes, exactly. They were over they were over that way. Yeah, North York Moors. Yeah.
Yes, and you walk around there, and if you ever read any of their novels, the energy of what was in those novels comes up to you, because y'all have been there so long. I mean, Britain's
Yeah.
just been there so long. And it's a very different energy, but it doesn't mean we don't have energies here. It
No,
doesn't mean
you do. Yeah.
I have a woman who corresponds with me who lives on some hills that finally got declared sacred so people can't build on them, but in West Texas. And, you know, you go to West Texas, it doesn't look like much is there. And
Right.
there's really a whole lot of energy going on around all of us all the time. And since I work with crystals and I also work with sacred geometry when I build my crystal grids, I use the concept of numbers and shape and form in sacred geometry to create the grids. It's people say, how do you do that? And I don't know. I just go to that other place and my upper management just comes in and takes over. And it gives you such a sense of peace and security. So I'm so glad we had Tim to come kind of explain some of the terms that I use all the time. And people go, how do I do that? And what you do it is you just find a quick something you really want to try to do and find out about and look at it. And that's the best way to go.
Yep,
and I want to thank everyone who joined us today. I want to, hi, Jeffrey. Jeffrey showed up late. Dr. Gale's here. But I want to thank everyone who's here. I want to remind everyone, Tim has a way you can join his channel, and it's like a cup of coffee, and he's going to create talking groups. You're working towards that on Zoom. I have a membership you can get into. It was originally based on people who own my garden to learn how to use my garden. But every other week on a Saturday, I have a couple of hours where if you have a garden, you can come play with your garden. If you just have questions, you can come play with your questions. But only members can get into that because that's a lot of time and energy. Oh, yeah, Cold Toes, who's in Alaska. And I cannot say the name of your tribe, but but it's been there for a long time.
People. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cold
Yeah,
Toes
awesome.
Cold Toes is someone who comes and talks with us every other week. But anyway,
That's great.
mine is like $5.99, and I didn't know this till I looked it up today because I can never remember what I charge. I looked it up, and YouTube this month is giving everybody 50% off. They're still giving me all my money, but they cut the membership for the first month so you can try it out.
Oh, okay.
And you should have time because you're all off on Christmas break, right? So come think about joining me, help support me, help keep us going. And I intend at some point, Tim, to come back and have you come back and visit our show.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Nice to meet you all.
Okay.
Great.
Love you guys. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.